Back on my show is the profound wisdom teacher, Tracee Stanley. Tracee is gifted in weaving devotion and practice into daily life. Her latest book, The Luminous Self, Sacred Yogic Practices and Rituals to Remember Who You Are, guides the reader on a journey of inner exploration. There is so much yumminess in this book. I mean, it's super radiant. Just look at the cover. It's glowing. Inside this amazing book, Tracee offers meditations and rituals to self-inquiry practices that are all designed to tap into a deeper understanding of yourself. All the practices and tools in this book have been experienced by Tracee and helped her reclaim her own inherent power and wisdom, and they can do the same for you. For a limited time, listeners can take 30% off this book when you pre-order at shambhala.com with the code LUM30. That's LUM30. And when you purchase the book, you can sign up for a free special live event with Tracee called the Luminous Self Book Club. Practicing with Tracee is a not to be missed opportunity to amplify the transformative tools in this book. This is a 4-week live virtual experience beginning on Tuesday, October 10th. You can find out more about this not to be missed experience in this episode. I have also signed up for it. So don't forget to head over to theconsciousdiva.com for all the info on the show notes page, including the discount code and instructions on how to access this beautiful practice. You can also listen to my previous interview with Tracee about her best-selling book, Radiant Rest. It is episode number 23. You can find me at tatianawright.com. Give me a shout out, write a review, and follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, I love it. I love the way it looks. And when I opened it out of the pack, so it came last week and I was like, quick, I need to get a copy of the book. Because, I really do read the books.
Yes, and I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm so excited that you have the first I'm getting to see it in your hands. And I don't even have mine yet. It's so lovely and it's so shiny.
Oh, and let's see if the light can reflect and pick it up well. Well, when it arrived and I opened it up, my husband was like, "Oh my God, look at the cover of this book." And he's like, "God, it's amazing. It's so great."
I love it. I can't wait to have it in my hands. I'm going to go to the post office after we chat and hope that it's there.
Well, let's begin.
Let's begin.
Thank you so much for coming back on and talking about your second book, The Luminous Self. I'm so excited. I loved I know it says sacred yogic practices and rituals to remember who you are, but there's so much more than that. I mean, this book it's about remembrance. And I love that you have included the statement from Indu Aurora, who's such a great teacher herself.
Amazing teacher. Yeah.
Oh, such a beautiful teacher. And I'm just going to read that because I think that statement is so important for people to hear as we go into this interview, which is yoga is not a feel-good practice. It is a face the truth practice. So I just wanted to open it up with explain what this is as you talk about what it means to connect to our luminous self.
It's such a beautiful thought, right? This feeling that comes when you hear the idea of, oh, I can connect to my luminous self. There's part of me that's luminous. And yet it's such a deep journey that I think for a lot of us, and I can speak mostly for myself, that it was really easier to look at what was not true about who I was and to let go of the pieces that were not in alignment with my dharma, that were not in alignment with who I felt I was, who I remembered that I was from way back as a little girl, and to let those pieces go to kind of allow a revealing to happen, as opposed to thinking that it was a journey that I could just get to right away by saying, oh, I want to remember my luminous self. It's like, let me remember first who I'm not.
With that statement that yoga, it's to remind us, right? It's this remembering, face the truth practice. And I think a lot of people don't get that. And I think that's where spiritual bypassing comes from. Yoga makes us feel so good that we can forget about facing our truth. And where's this discomfort?
When I was introduced to Western yoga, it was all about working out, looking good, feeling good, you're going to feel great after the practice. And that is true. You do feel great a lot of times after the practice. But there's also sometimes in the practice where there's something that arises that feels like a block or an obstacle or a thought that you are having consistently that you weren't aware of, or a feeling that you're having. And we can use, quote unquote, yoga to bypass over that and just, be all positive vibes, love and light. But that's not the essence. That's not what's really there. And I didn't know that as a practitioner until I picked up my first translation of the Yoga Sutras. And once I started to read a little bit about the Yoga Sutras, that's when my yogic path took a turn, because I realized that, oh, the yoga that I'm practicing right now, the teachers that I'm practicing with, they're not talking about this promise of yoga. They're not talking about the 8 limbs. They're not talking about the yamas and the niyamas. So something's missing here, and I want to learn what it is that's missing. And then, of course, when you start diving into these deeper philosophies, what comes up is the discomfort, which is also a symbol to me of truth arising. Like there's some truth that's coming forward that's not in alignment with how you see the world or how you're living. And it is there to make you look at it and to make you pause.
I'd love for you to just talk about some of the practices. I mean, I literally went through and made, so many notes, and without giving away the whole book, I did highlight a few that I'd love to talk to you about. But firstly, these are life-changing practices, and you've got everything in here from shaking it out to tantric contemplations to breath work and mind mapping. So I'd love for you to quickly explain the differences between a practice, self-inquiry, and rituals, because these can all be considered self-care practices, but yet they're not.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because, a ritual is any action that we do with intention, with devotion, habitually, consistently, with reverence, right? So we could say that if we approach our practice with devotion and reverence, that it and intention, that it is a ritual. If we approach our self-inquiry in that same way, it's a ritual. And yet we can also say that the things that we do habitually and consistently without any intention, like scrolling first thing in the morning on Instagram or whatever it is that we do without really thinking about it, is an unconscious ritual, right? So I think this idea of ritual asks us to really look at how are we living in the day to day? How are we living in the moment? How are we in moving through life with intention?
Mm.
So that would be the first thing that I would say. I'm offering practices that I have done myself and have really lived with and felt like I've embodied them to some degree, to be able to teach them and hold space for others while they have been living with these practices. So these are all practices that I've shared. And these practices to me are more than just a practice. It's more than just, oh, let's open the book and do this practice. I'm really calling people in to practice a sadhana, right? To come back into that devoted practice, that consistent practice, which we can say is a sadhana. We can say it's a ritual. And at the same time, with self inquiry, my hope is that these questions that I ask help people to, at some point, become their own self inquiry generator, right? I know that for me, when I started the practice of self inquiry, after a while, I started to hear the questions that I needed to ask myself.
And you talk about that throughout the whole book, the tuning in. You've actually with mind mapping, particularly the questions that you ask there. I'd actually never done a mind mapping practice, so I might just have you explain what that is, mind mapping. And I know that's not the first practice that you do in the book. It's about
Yeah.
halfway through, but I when I looked at that chart, that diagram, and followed in that chapter, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Like, so I wrote in the book around in the ovals, and I loved it. And I just did it because I've only had the book for a week. So I just started doing it. So I'm going to do as you recommend. So I thought
Hmm.
I'll see to the end of the year, see what shifts. And it was interesting that that was in your book, because I love to read the books that I'm sent for guests that are coming on, or authors. And I believe that you can always learn more. Like, we can always learn more and continue to
Yeah.
do our work and expand ourselves. And with each person, there's always some fresh takeaway for me. And so with this book, your book, it was the mind mapping. And I really enjoyed it, because I have been actually struggling with procrastination myself. That's the thing that's
Right.
plagued me my whole life, like literally my whole life. And I know how to kind of cheat that. Get
Right. Right.
around it. Like, when I was a television producer, I'd procrastinate for like weeks and weeks in the pre-pro, and then when like the 2 weeks gearing up right before, I'd be like, suddenly I'd get into action and be like, all right, here's what my brain, something would just click on in my brain. So I'm going to use this as a practice, an opportunity to really like crack that seriously and get through it.
I love that you're saying that, because I can definitely relate to procrastination. Same thing when I was producing, it would be like, okay, 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 okay. And at some point I was able to trace that back. So mind mapping is a practice that I was introduced to by a woman named Isabel de Soleil, who was an assistant for one of my first teachers, my first tantric teachers. And she introduced this practice to us. And then that teacher actually wound up using a similar method in one of his books. But it's also known as radiant thinking, right? It's this idea of taking a core theme, right? And in the prior chapter, we explore this idea of impermanence, right? And so we do a practice around impermanence, and you will come up with something that's really important to you in life, that is thematic for you. And that becomes your core theme. And then from there, we kind of reach out to these other places to allow us to say, okay, this theme is so important to me that I want to infuse it in every part of my life.
Mm.
So if I have goals, are these goals in line with this theme, right?
Yeah.
Are they in line with the theme? What are the obstacles that come up around this? Because we all have the obstacles. You just said procrastination. So I've got this goal, I have something I want to do, but procrastination. Can I create an auspicious action that's an antidote for that procrastination?
Mm.
Can I practice self devotion every day? Because that brings us into this worthiness that by the fact that we are here on this earth and that we are breathing, we are worthy. And a lot of times when we think about this idea of self devotion, it feels selfish.
Mm.
And it's self devotion is different than self care, in my estimation.
Mhm.
So there's a bubble in the mind map for how are you practicing self devotion today? How are you offering to your community today? Because this is not a path that is individualistic, even though we're so focused on hyper individualism. It all means that we're connected, and we have to remember that connection and how we can offer the gifts of our practices and the things that we learn to our community. And at the same time, um, we really want to be able to look at this not in a linear way, but in a way that is in flow. And so, what I love about the mind map is that a lot of times when we have, let's say, a to do list, it feels like, oh, I've got to do this thing today. And it feels like too much. And when it feels like too much, it's like, okay, it's so easy to procrastinate and put it off to the next day. But if we can just find one action that helps to unwind a little bit of the obstacle, and we can find another small thing that we can do that's auspicious and in alignment with that core principle, before you know it, after the 30, the 90 days, you've moved so much closer in such a way that is in flow,
Mhm.
and it feels much more effortless, and it feels fun to do the mind map every day for 5 minutes. and then to have it sit on your desk, which is what I love to do, is I keep it on my desk. And as I'm working or as I'm walking through the house, I glance at it and I remember, oh, okay, I need to practice my yoga nidra. I need to take a walk out in nature. I need to do this other thing, whatever it is.
Yeah. I love that. And I opened up the page to the bubble, and I'd love to share with you what I wrote in here.
Oh, yes. What page are you on?
Well, page 94.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and actually I stuck I made an asterisk on the post-it on the page, so I could always like immediately come back to it. But
I
I
love it.
wrote, and I'm actually working on a book right now. So I had my book in there as my do word. And then the auspicious goal was align myself for the greater good of all. The whispers of the soul always. I'm always in community with
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
guides, or and I love that question in there too, because I was like, oh yeah, I can totally write down hundreds of moments from 10 years ago or whatever.
Perfect. I
Life,
love that.
actually.
I love that.
And then the daily self-devotion, meditation. It's so easy, even though I have a practice, an established practice, it's so easy for me to just go, oh, something else, and do it later on. So then I wrote down my auspicious action, yoga, or then also going outside. And I did this yesterday, actually. I was like, I need to just step outside and walk around and be in nature, and just and I actually went outside barefoot. I was like, I really need to just earth underneath me and just reconnect. And that was really great to come back and do that. And obviously obstacles and resistances, procrastination. And then for community care, I put my practices and donating. And I loved that, because I'm actually recording practices now that are about to go out on an app, another the Hay House Empower You app, actually.
Beautiful.
So thank you. So I was going to put it in a journal and just leave the page open, and I was going to
Yes.
tomorrow morning
Yeah.
write it out, drawing my
Start
own.
a whole new journal with your mind map. It's really a special practice.
Yeah,
I'm glad that I was introduced to it.
amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you've got some really great, not just the descriptions of each bubble, but how to tune in if maybe someone is not such an advanced practitioner, or is just beginning. And actually I found that consistently throughout your whole book. Nobody really needs to know anything about Tantra or
That's right.
any of the practices. And the neti practice, for example, I mean, this is a great bhavana, right? And it's from the Vijnana Bhairava, but no one needs
Yeah.
to know that,
Right.
what any of that means, because it's such a wonderful practice. And so just talk about neti. What does this mean? And
Oh,
why
neti
is
neti.
it so expansive?
I love this question because the people that I know who have read the book already, they all are asking about the neti neti practice. And they're asking about the neti neti practice because most people have done, if you've been practicing for a long time, at some point you were introduced to this neti neti practice. And I remember the very first time that I practiced this neti neti, and it was in Shavasana at the end of a yoga class. And it blew my mind because I felt all of a sudden expansive. I became aware that, at least what it seemed like in the moment, was that I was not breathing,
Oh.
right? And that was suspended in time and space, and it felt so blissful and so incredible. And so this neti neti is translated a couple of different ways. When I first learned it, it was translated to me as not this, not that. And then later I got another translation, which was not this, not this. And then a friend recently told me that when she practiced it, someone gave her the translation of not me, not mine, which I thought was also very interesting. I had never heard that before.
Me too. Wow.
And so it's this practice really of negating everything to come to the truth. Because there's so much in the mind, there's so much in the personality, there's so much in our field of awareness. And so the practice of how I received it of neti neti was basically either lying down or closing your eyes and just becoming aware first of the breath, and then just noticing what comes into your field of awareness. And each time there's a color, there's a shape, there's a thought, there's a sound, you just silently repeat to yourself, neti neti, knowing that it means not this, and feel it dissolve. And then you just keep going. And you can do this for 3 minutes or you could do it for 30 minutes. And to me, the practice is just sublime.
I love that you've got practices included on the Shambhala website. It's shambhala.com, right, / Luminous Self practices. So it's wonderful that you've got a bunch included there. So I listened to that one this morning, and it was such a great reminder. And it was interesting. As I was listening to you, I was reminded of an incident the very first time I went to India. And I was going for a shoot, actually. So I had landed in Mumbai. We'd flown out of Newark with the crew, and how it is production. We'd had our carnet, we had all of our gear, we had all the production equipment, multiple hard, Pelican cases and all this stuff. And we had allegedly paid for all of the overweight luggage going through to our final destination in India. So we're in Mumbai, we land. We were flying to Bangalore, and in India, and it was my first time, and I'd never seen anyone actually in real life saying neti 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 neti, So, and it was such a great reminder this morning that we can use this practice in everyday circumstances. It doesn't just have to be in meditation. And in the moment when I was reminded, it brought laughter. It made my heart really soft and giggle, because I remember this woman that we had to deal with at the flight desk who was like, no, you need to pay. Like, you need to pay again, like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like for overweight, like you need to pay again. And my DP was like, and I was the producer. So he wasn't paying for it, but he was bitching and moaning and so upset and being very New York about it, and she was just neti 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 neti, like, this is the way it is. Like, this is the way it is. And just like in that moment, I was like, wow. Doesn't matter what we say. Shit, like, these are the facts. We have to pay again. There's no point arguing, getting upset, bringing a struggle forward, or being annoyed. I'm not paying for it. It's going on the production budget, but still, obviously, you don't want to have to incur, additional fees on the budget.
Right.
But I was like, there's no point. I just need to let this go. And so it was such a nice reminder to see that in action with a real person.
With a real person.
There's no need to be arguing with her. She's not going to budge. So why bother? And so this morning it made me laugh, because I was like, I'd so forgotten that, because this is a great practice just to do in moments when you might be experiencing a lot of other things and you just want it to kind of dissolve into the softness of just being able to kind of just deal. It's neither this nor that. As you said, not this, not that. It just is. So be it. Like, move beyond that. So,
I love that story. I love that story. It's such a beautiful reminder of how we can weave, because it's a weaving, right? And it's and that woman was a teacher in that moment. It's beautiful.
Yeah, she sure was. Yeah, it was really funny. And I had only recently learned that practice too. And so to see it in action was in the real world, outside of doing it by myself or being guided, was really cool. Actually, it was like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. So you have got so many, you've got the digital amnesia. I mean, I think this is a really important point that when I was reading that, I thought, this is amazing. So could you expand on digital amnesia and what Viyoga is?
Yeah. So, digital amnesia is kind of this phenomenon that happens when we basically outsource our memory to our phones or our devices, right? We outsource. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm definitely old enough to remember that I used to be able to remember everybody's phone number by heart.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even have like a little book. I knew everybody's phone number, knew how to get places. Now we outsource our knowing.
I'm almost 50, by the way. So yes, I remember.
There used to be, this where if we needed to go somewhere, we would look at the map, or we would look at Google, what was it called? MapQuest back in the day.
MapQuest, you print out the maps. Oh,
And you
every
would
car
print out the
came with,
map.
and every rental car came with like a Michelin guide book if you were overseas, and you got the maps, and you literally had to sit there and plot out your way and figure out how to get to your destination.
Exactly. And then you would remember how to get back to that destination because you looked at the map, you figured it out, you knew how to get from one place to the next place. And so what's happening is we're outsourcing our memories in these little ways that are having big impacts on our memory, right? And what I can kind of connect this to is this idea that yoga brings us to this place of smarana. It brings us to this place that is a practice really of the root word of smarana is smriti, which means memory and retention, right? And it's really the memory, the remembrance of the self is where we're going, right? So this idea of V yoga is really when you kind of separate yourself away from something in order to remember the source of something else. And so there's a number of practices in the book that I have done myself, and all these practices. And in a way, it's really interesting because I felt like if I could leave a time capsule of practices that people could use to become free, these are the practices that I would put in the time capsule.
I don't even know my son's cell phone number, which is, I know my husband's cell phone number because when we got cell phones years ago, I was still memorizing his number. But I don't even know my son's or my daughter's cell phone numbers. And I keep saying to myself, I've got to memorize them. I've got to memorize them. And it's just so easy to just press a button and call somebody. And I'm often like, oh my God, what if I don't have a phone on me and I need to ring them, or something's happened? I don't know their numbers. So it's so important. And we've totally lost this vital skill. I think I can still recall phone numbers from my friends, my school friends from when I was like a teenager, and calling my friends on a push button phone. I dial a rotary phone,
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. So talk about now, what's the practice of V yoga?
So the practice of V yoga is creating the separation. And what I love, one of the V yoga practices that I really love is because you talked about this question of who am I?
Yeah.
Right. We have so much that we could answer that question. Who am I? All the things that I do, all the places that I live, all the activities that I do. But if we separate ourselves for a moment and ask this question, who am I not? Then we really start to get somewhere. And so this practice was a practice that I was introduced to many, many years ago, read about it in different texts, this idea of who am I not? And I found that it was, again, one of those other practices like neti neti, that because there was this negation, there was this separation, that it created the expansion. And so I have a practice in the book that you can do, basically looking at yourself in the mirror, recording yourself, answering the question, who am I not and who am I? And then listening back to it and making notes about what is it that you heard? What is it that you felt? And what is it that you learned from listening to your own answers? And this is something that you can just continue to do over and over for any time, really, any amount of time,
Yeah.
until you get to the essence of something.
Yeah. And what's amazing about this practice too is initially you can hear like the struggle or the hesitation, almost like or the doubt, like the sort of questioning. And then over time it elevates as you become closer to that truth, that true aspect of yourself. So it can also be a hard practice for many people to do initially, because people aren't used to looking in the mirror and confronting themselves.
It is, it's not, it's not an easy practice to do, because and I think it's one that we all need to do, because we all need to be able to really see what's behind the veils, what's behind the masks, what's behind the shields that we put up.
When I work with my clients, as a transformational coach, I give a variation of this practice, and I always say, just allow what needs to come. If you are experiencing a struggle, or you feel like you're going to cry, just let those emotions come up, because eventually you'll reach a point where you're laughing and you're enjoying this, because your true self has come out, and you actually are connecting with the aspect of yourself. I always say, think of it as your higher self speaking to you, not you as your reflection in the mirror, but something greater than yourself, to help drop into that space.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So you've also got this great description of the practice of awe. And the other thing I really loved about your book is that it's not just tantric practices. You've incorporated these, like the practice of awe, which is such a simple thing for people to do, but yet something that I think not many people do. We've just so lost touch with this. So explain, what is the practice of awe? And I love your story about Table Mountain.
Oh, one of the things that I think is missing from, and you just spoke to it, is the fact that we don't pause enough. We don't stop enough to take in our environment, right? To be in gratitude. And I think when we start to lose these experiences of joy and our connection to joy and our connection to awe, we're too busy, again, with the digital amnesia. We're too busy when we see the beautiful triple rainbow, and I'm no different. The first thing that happens is people whip out their phones.
Yeah.
They don't stand there for a moment to take it in and think about, wow, what a miracle this is, a triple rainbow. And I'm saying triple rainbow because I just saw a triple rainbow a couple of weeks ago, and it was the first time I had ever seen a triple rainbow. And it was really interesting because the first person who noticed it was my friend's son, who's a teenager. And he came back with such childlike, even though he's like a, teenager getting ready to graduate, like super cool, he came back with this absolute awe. Oh my God, there's a triple rainbow. And everybody in the restaurant went out to look at this triple rainbow, and we were all in awe. And so if we can just think about, like, maybe like I'm feeling that feeling of the awe in my body, it's still alive in my cells. So if people listening can just think about, feel into, remember the last time that they felt this sense of awe, where were they? What were they doing? It brings something back to us that I think is an inherent part of who we are, which is this sense of wonder, this sense of grace, this reminder that beauty is all around us. And so that's why I included that practice in the book, because I felt like we need to remember the awe. It's a miracle that we're here. It's a miracle that we're breathing.
When I was reading that section, three very distinct memories came. Firstly, was I've also been to South Africa, so I have witnessed that incredible or amazing image, right, of the clouds cascading over Table Mountain, where they just roll over in they spill down the side of the mountain like a white tablecloth, and it's so beautiful to witness. And this was before smartphones or cameras even in our phones. It was over 20 years ago, and it was really wild, because it's not every day, it's almost every day, right, that the clouds spill over. And and even for the locals, it never gets old. It's really this beautiful thing that everyone, notice people stop and take that in. And then when you go up there on the top of the mountain to witness and be up in it as the clouds are shifting and changing, and the temperature drops drastically, and to feel all of that and to be in a cloud, it was a wild moment. And I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I actually didn't have phones on myself, or the phones that are today's phones didn't exist, because maybe I would have missed that entire experience from just snapping, taking photos of the view from the top of Table Mountain, looking back.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for naming that, because I can definitely say, it was over 30 years ago where I had that what I talk about in the book as a moment of spontaneous meditation without having a practice, without knowing anything. I was watching the tablecloth on Table Mountain. If that had been today, it's very likely that moment would have been missed
Yeah.
because there was no distraction. There was nothing taking my awareness away from what I had my one pointed focus on was
Yeah.
the tablecloth and the movement of the clouds on the mountain. And that one pointed focus became emerging and moved into meditation. I
Yeah.
didn't have those words then, didn't know what was happening then. And honestly, in this moment, I'm just also putting together the sequence of how it all unfolded.
It's like a feeling of majesty that overcomes you, and you merge with this experience, with this natural occurrence, that it's like, wow. It was really expansive for me as well. I was really like,
Mhm.
wow, this is amazing to be witnessing. And like I said, you can just tell that the residents there feel the same way, even though they get to see it almost every day. It's like never gets old for them. And I love that you've got the cosmic egg in here. So I'd love you to talk about the cosmic egg. One of my favorite Sanskrit words is actually Haranyabhaga, because I just think it's so
Uh,
amazing. And it's like,
yeah,
the concept of that is so cool, So
I love that you love that. Yeah. It's said that Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic egg, the golden egg, the cosmic womb, there's so many different translations, is the first teacher of yoga. And so that to me, it's like there's not much more I can add to that. But that there is this place within us that is connected to this first teacher, right? And it's like when we get still enough and we're in awe or we're in deep practice or we're in pause or we're resting, we get to touch into this luminosity. And it's such a beautiful space for us to know exists within us.
yeah,
We can also think about this idea of Sutra 136 that talks about this luminosity that's also within us, that is eternal. And that Sutra 136, and I recommend that anybody who's interested just find their translation. Hopefully you have one, or you can Google the translation of Yoga Sutra 136 and find a few of them because there's so many different ways that this has been translated. My whole yoga journey, I said it before about the Yoga Sutras, it was this one particular Yoga Sutra that shifted my entire trajectory.
Mhm.
To know that there's a place inside of me that is beyond all sorrow, that means that there's a stripping away that has to happen. And then at some point, you find that luminosity, and you may find yourself inside of the golden egg, inside of that deep beauty, inside of that teacher, inside of that light that is protective and guiding and nurturing at the same time.
I love that also you begin with your book and you close your book with the analogy of your very real ritual with the egg, the actual physical egg. But
Mhm.
when you end with one of the last practices is to get in touch with your luminous self and the cosmic egg, and to just explain a little more, that's this ultimate place of creation, right? The place of the unmanifest, the place that we can just tap into so
Mhm.
much radiance. And when I'm meditating on that, I believe that it's the place of like where we will return and the place where we come from.
Mm,
And,
absolutely.
and I mean, gosh, I have so many things. You've got, the ancestor practice, connecting to our guides, setting up the ancestor altar, so many beautiful things, the elements, connecting to the elements and why that's important. The jibber jabber practice. Would you like to talk to any of those points? Because there's so many wonderful practices in here, and I just love it. I love your book. I think this is
Oh,
an awesome book. Yeah, everyone should get it.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really wanted to offer, as I said before, the practices that really helped me. And I wanted to offer them in a krama that I felt would be, and when we think about this idea of krama, it's can be translated as a wise progression. So sequenced in a way that there's a revealing after each practice. There's a shedding after each practice. There's a knowing that comes to you after each practice. And so I think that if there's any practice that I mean, there's a lot of practices in here, and I want there to be a lot of practices. People always ask, "Look, wow, you share so many practices." It's like, yes, because we need them.
Yeah.
And maybe there's going to be a practice that doesn't resonate with you, but there's going to be one practice that resonates with you. And each one of these practices, in my experience, has been a portal to deeper knowing. The one practice that I really love, and here is a practice that was shared with me by a teacher by the name of Charlie Morley, who's a lucid dreaming teacher, a Formist Buddhist monk. And it's a practice that asks you to contemplate on impermanence and the last moments of your life. And that practice will, I feel, and from what I have seen from people that I have worked with, it is a game changer. It will shift the trajectory of your life towards truth and towards what is in alignment for your soul in a way that nothing else has or can in such a short period of time, as long as you continue to follow up with remembering what you learned in the practice. That's the most important thing. Remembering. And I really feel like all of these practices are about remembering. The Jibba Jabba practice is amazing. I did that practice with a friend of mine many years ago named Rod Mose. And this is just the practice of shaking and giving voice to all those thoughts and things and feelings in the sound of Jibba Jabba, right? And we a lot of times we do it as a group. And when you do it as a group and you hear everybody saying jibba jabba, it sounds like what the mind sounds like when it feels confused or when it just isn't clear. And it's a way to really kind of help the nervous system, right? Especially in times of stress. Shaking, we watch our dogs shake all the time. They shake it off, right? It's like shaking is a really good way for us to clear and to reset. So I love the shaking. I do it all the time. If anytime during the day where I need to like transition and reset, it's a beautiful practice. But what I love, and thank you for mentioning that Shambhala gave me the opportunity to record 8 of the practices. So I recorded 8 of the practices. And when you purchase the book, you receive a link inside of the book that allows you to download these practices. And if you buy the book before October 10th, when it comes out, there's also a free book club. So the free book club is like a 4-week book club with me where we're taking deep dives into the philosophy and into the practices together as a community.
Beautiful. And that's live with you?
It's live. Yeah. It's live on Zoom.
Oh, that's amazing. Right? That's super cool. I'm going to have
Yeah,
to
I'm excited for
I'm gonna have to check it
that.
out. I think that's invaluable, actually, especially for people who might possibly be new to any of these teachings, just to understand, right? It's an opportunity, I'm assuming, for people to ask you questions too, like how can I work with this in a deeper way? Or maybe something's come up and they're struggling.
It's basically like a 40-day container where we're all doing a sadhana together. We're all doing sadhana together. So we're all kind of held in the container. We're all free to ask questions, to share experiences. I feel like that sometimes is missing with books. It's just really nice to be able to hold people with the practices and for me to also learn, because when we come into circle in these, experiences, everybody is a teacher. So just by the sharing or asking questions, it's a teaching. So it's one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, thank you. That is so generous of you, and really a gift. And will you be picking the practice, or does everyone, they get to pick their own practice from the book?
No, we'll be going through. So there's certain practices that I feel like need to be done together. Like there's some, like the more, if we want to say advanced practitioner might read some of these practices and be like, oh, I know how to do this practice because it's similar to something else that I've done. But I really want some of the practices on impermanence and some of the practices that needed reflection or to work in dyads, that we do those together. So we'll go through the book and we'll be choosing most of the practices that are not recorded will be the ones that I'll be working with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that one on impermanence really was intriguing to me. I have not done that practice before. And as
Mhm.
I was reading it, I was really like, wow, this is not, I thought to myself, okay, this is not a quick, I'm going to read through this. This actually is reflective and I need to
Yeah.
like have a journal and actually rewrite the questions out and then
Mhm.
contemplate that and then see what comes up, what's potentially triggering me about what's coming up. So I read
Mhm.
through it just like I would a book, but I
Mhm.
have not gone to sit there and do them yet, but that was something I plan to do. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
This is a good
Yeah.
opportunity to do it in a setting where you're kind of forced to really contemplate in a sense because you're doing it with
Mhm.
other people. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you're being held in a sacred space.
nice. Well, I love it. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about why the ancestor practice is important? There was a lot in this section with some
Mm.
people. Uh,
Yeah, all of these practices really relate to the forgetting, right? It's like trying to bring us back from the forgetting. I think that we went through a portal during the pandemic, the early pandemic, where we became aware of our own mortality, right? And it made us remember those who came before us. And I think a lot of people also became more connected to their ancestors because the veil was very thin. So these practices around our ancestors are a way for us to remember who we are because our ancestors are part of who we are, even if we don't know their names, even if we don't know because we were adopted, right? Their epigenetics is flowing through us, their DNA is flowing through us, the places they live, the foods they ate, the prayers they said for us, they're all part of us. So it's really important for me to be connected to ancestors and to kind of open this portal of just curiosity around who am I? The same with dreams. A lot of times we just dismiss our dreams as, oh, the mind is just processing. It's just a regurgitation of whatever happened during this week. But sometimes we have dreams that feel like they're more than just the mind processing. They feel like a message or they feel like something sacred has happened. And so I think it's really important also for us to remember our dreams, right? To have a different relationship with dreams as just something that gets forgotten about. So all of these portals in this book are ways into more remembrance of who we really are and allowing us to kind of be in the space of having the courage to release who we're not so we can really be more embodied in the true self.
what a beautiful way to end. Love it. Thank you. So much wisdom in this book and so heartfelt. And you can really, when you read it immediately from the very first page, I was like, oh, this is going to be a really profound book. It was written so beautifully, and you have woven all the practices in really well. And you can really could experience that these were things you had gone through. And that's why they were so meaningful to you to share with readers. So you've done an amazing job of making them super accessible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.